this year was shit. This year hasn't been good for anyone at all. I do feel like we should still look at some of the things that we still love. I personally still love cinema so much, and I feel like acknowledging everything that I have loved that has come out this year is still important for my health, my mental health. Best Star Wars Cup. There have been a lot of movies that came out this year, believe it or not. And in before everyone says, how did anything come out? The cinemas have been closed, you fool. Everything has come out this year. There have been a lot of movies that have come out this year thanks to DVD sales, thanks to video on demand, and especially streaming. Nearly every single movie I talk about today is available for you to watch right now. I'm going to be splitting this video into two different parts. My favorite movies and my least favorite movies. If you just want to see what I want to say about my favorite movies, you can click to this part. But otherwise, I thought, let's just get the bad ones, or ones I didn't care for, over and done with. Oh god, I'll rip this band-aid off. That was... I really wanted to like The Perfect Candidate, but it was just dull, unfortunately. I didn't really care for the characters or anything that was going on. Call of the Wild, though the movie was fun, the reliance of CGI makes the movie age quite a bit already. Released the raw cut, you cowards. Enola Holmes was a movie.
I think I am a... what do they call it? I think they call it a flat earther.
Secret Garden. I don't know why I watched this. All I remember from it was Colin Firth, The Hunt. A movie that shows its satirical teeth, however, hardly ever bites. It's basically forming political ideologies from Twitter more so than the real world. It's very lame, really, and it just comes across like a cheaper version of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Onward. Pixar has fantastic animation. However, when using fantasy as icing and the 21st century as the building block, the animation doesn't have the ability to fully explore the realm of fantasy. Personally, I don't really care for much of the movie. The final act was the biggest change of pace from Pixar movie in years that I love, but if that only takes effect in the final third, then I only enjoyed about 1/3 of the movie, unfortunately. Tenet, incredibly obnoxious, especially for a Christopher Nolan movie. I don't mind Nolan's filmography, however, this movie uses all of his worst qualities. The mixing is too loud, the character is just bad exposition, the antagonist is incredibly two-dimensional. I was lucky to watch this in the cinema, and my friend and I had to cover our ears throughout the entire experience. This was a one-off experience in that cinema where that happened. Sonic the Hedgehog. I would have loved this movie as a child. There was definitely some charm here, but for the most part I found it to be incredibly cliche and annoying. Birds of Prey. I was too harsh on the movie in my review. I rewatched it with a friend earlier this year. It's still annoying in a lot of ways, but I do appreciate a lot of the presentation choices a lot more. King of Staten Island. Another movie from Judd Apatow with uninspired directing. The movie is based on Pete Davidson's life, but unfortunately the improvised humor directing just didn't connect with me at all. The Witches. Honestly, the first third of the movie was pretty good, but the movie fell off the rails quickly with an over-reliance of CGI. Less is more, and that's definitely the case with this movie. The introduction of the witch was great, however, the more that we were seen of her, the less horrifying it became. The Babysitter was fucking lame. The New Mutants is a poorly written horror movie that looks like it has a budget of something that's much lower than what's being presented. Hubie Halloween. I really didn't want to punch down with an Adam Sandler comedy, however, this one is particularly frustrating because there's a lot of framing and setups that are humorous on their own, but the punchline themselves just either drag on for too long or they're just so overblown or underacted, it just kind of feels lazy. Scoob. This movie is the epitome of how do you do, fellow children. It's written by people who don't really care about telling a story, they just wanted to check in on the Hanna-Barbera license. The animation is very lame. There's a sense of minimalism that's supposed to mirror the animation in the original 60s TV show. However, that animation matched with the modern technology just creates this very bland, uninspired, that just looks very dull and just looks like it's over-filtered. The Social Dilemma. If you're going to be spending 2/3 of your movie telling a melodramatic soap opera, then be prepared for me to treat your movie as a melodramatic soap opera. It's nearly impossible for any documentary to present itself in a completely unbiased fashion. This movie manages to completely miss the mark in that sense. There's a scene where we are shown protest footage from the Black Lives Matter movement earlier in 2020, and we are told that the reason why everyone is rioting is because there is a divide between the different sides in social media. What an absolutely abhorrent take. To think that people are rioting because no one's listening to each other's side completely misses the point of the Black Black Lives Matter movement, but also on top of that, emotionally manipulating people into not even bothering to understand the other side. It's not as simple as saying, hey, one person is making good points, the other person isn't. It's a simple stop killing people on the streets, except no, we have to make this socially relevant. So let's show some of the most shocking events of these years, the most shocking footage of people getting killed, people being brutalized, and saying, yeah, this is because no one's listening to each other. Fuck off. Fantasy Island. The movie's not scary, it's very lame, it's got horrible color corrections, it looks like a very cheap commercial. If you thought one plot twist was risky, wait till you hear 8 more. The plot becomes so ridiculously convoluted that it doesn't even become funny bad, it just becomes tiring. Just throwing whatever at the wall to say, hey, look, we were planning this all along, even though no one was acting the way that they would have if that was the case. Milan. No! The Alpha Test is a very cheap movie that seems like it's a bunch of people who don't really care what they're making. With a movie with such a low budget, you've got so many limitations, but what's impressive are the people who are able to make something with what limited information they have. With this movie, it seems like they just wanted to make an excuse to have people kill each other, which is fine. That's completely fine in a horror movie. However, if you're gonna have a social commentary, don't revert back to the same social commentary we've been hearing before for Black Mirror. What if AI becomes sentient? We haven't seen that before. The movie just has some of the worst production I've ever seen. The blood looks like cordial. None of the characters are memorable. All of the performances aren't good. The design of the Google Home device that you've used looks absolutely stupid. Not good. Let's see if we can speed through some of my favourite movies of the year. Da 5 Blood is a Spike Lee joint about Vietnam veterans who are going back to Vietnam, and I haven't had quite a great track history with Spike Lee. I love Do the Right Thing, and I did like Black Klansman for the most part. Someone will be talking and they'd splice in historical photographs or video of the events that took place, but unfortunately for me, I felt like doing that really ruined the pacing of the movie. I just couldn't find myself engaging with any of the dialogue, any of the humour, any of the character. I was kind of hoping it'd be as colourful as the poster projected, but no. Oh well. Aaron Sorkin, writer of The Social Network, released his film debut, The Trial of the Chicago 7, based on historical events, and this movie is basically everyone clapped the movie. There were quite a few scenes where comedic relief would do something kind of witty, but then everyone in the courtroom would start laughing and clapping. I can see Aaron Sorkin thinking that he's so smart with a lot of the dialogue in the movie, and there are elements at play that work so well. However, it needed a director to ground everything, to make everything feel realistic. The pacing of the movie, especially in the first act, sets you up for something that's very energetic, very fun, that contrasts against the standard idea of a courtroom. However, I do feel like the pacing grows tiresome after the first act. It feels like it runs out of fuel. The script needed a director that was able to ground the story. Pretending I'm a Superman is the documentary based on the making of the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games, and I love those games. I played them heaps when I was a wee pup. This documentary was kind of just the history of the game. It kind of did feel very surface level. I kind of didn't gather much new information on it. However, I wouldn't say that I was bored throughout the entirety of the movie. It does go through the history of the music that was used in the game as well, and that was pretty interesting, but yeah, I'd still recommend it. The next Pixar movie is Soul. I was caught off guard with how much I did enjoy this one. Though I wouldn't say I loved the movie, I did enjoy it much more than many of Pixar's other movies that they've released in the last however many years. Quite honestly, I feel like Pixar haven't had a great track record recently. They've kind of been releasing the same thing over and over again. Oh boy, I can't wait for the good guy to actually be the bad guy. Who remembers Finding Dory? Or The Good Dinosaur? But yeah, again, this movie has that issue with the animation where you can see marks on people's skin and it's so detailed. However, I feel like that super hyper detailed depiction of New York just doesn't quite fit with animation.
Not you, Terry's. You've been great.
I still enjoyed the movie for the most part. I loved the music, though I was kind of wish it incorporated more soul music into it, but yeah. White Right is a documentary about punk bands in the 70s and how they formed the festival Rock Against Racism. I personally love punk music, especially music from the 70s, and I feel like this was quite informative with the political intrigue at the time. There was a great understanding of all the issues Britain was facing at that point. Unfortunately for me, I felt like a lot of the pacing didn't mesh well. There were lots of points where it came across a little too sporadic at points. However, I would still recommend recommend the movie to anyone who's a fan of music. Bill and Ted Face the Music caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting to like a sequel to a movie close to 30 years after the first one came out. To have the original writers on board, I feel like really elevated the movie. Alex Winter and Bridget Lundy Payne absolutely carried the movie. They were very dorky, very goofy, but they managed to maintain that charm that came with the Bill and Ted movies. Personally, I grew up watching the Bill and Ted movies as a young child, and I really do love those movies, and this one maintains that same charisma, that same energy, that same wholesome male energy that goes against male stereotypes of 80s action movies, and this one continues it. Possessor is a horror gore movie. This is Brandon Cronenberg's debut film, I'm pretty sure. You can tell that he has strong interest in production design and especially gory effects. Though I did like the movie overall, there were some effects that I feel like could have been left on the cutting board. If you like something like Black Mirror, I feel like you should watch this movie. It's very unsettling to say the least. Palm Springs is a rom-com that I do not want to say much about, but I would recommend it to almost anyone. It's really funny. It stars Andy Samberg and Kristen Milotti. It's a movie that's best to go in completely blind for a date night, and it's honestly, like, I don't want to say much more. I just want to recommend it to as many people as possible because it's such an everyone movie. It's very funny, very charming, and I could say it's like another movie, but it would be a spoiler. So, Max Richter's Sleep is a documentary about the touring process of Max Richter's Sleep. Max Richter's Sleep is just an album by Max Richter. It's, I think it was 8 hours long. The idea is that it's all just meditative music to relax to. The movie goes through the process of making the album and the tour, and you see as they were touring this album, they did concerts late at night for 8 hours basically, and it's remarkable how intuitive the music process is. The director has gone on to say that they wanted the movie to simulate the same effect as the album. So if you fall asleep during the movie, I guess the director did their job. Bad Trip is a movie that stars Eric Andre, and it's absolutely hilarious. Its plot itself is very thin, very linear, very straightforward. However, what keeps the movie together are all these pranks. The pranks in this movie work as the scaffold, basically, whereas the story is just a little bit of icing on the top, because in reality, it's not really a movie that's focused so heavily on its plot. It's just a bunch of pranks pulled together. What I find so fascinating about this movie is the humor I could see being attempted in a standard comedy, but what elevates it so much are the human reactions. Often you would get a comedy and they'd have an "oh my god" situation at a dinner table, and it would just not be that funny, whereas what makes this so funny is seeing everyone freak out over bizarre situations, and it's elevated by Eric Andre's performance.
I saw a girl, no way.
What do you do?
I saw a girl today.
Get the fuck away from me.
Her name is Maria.
Tiffany Haddish was in it as well. It's the first movie I've seen her in which made me genuinely laugh, so that's a compliment. Class Action Park is a documentary about Action Park Water Park in
America,
and all of its lawsuits it had for being unsafe. I had a lot of people say that they had issues with the sound in this movie, the sound mixing, and I didn't have any issues. The movie is strangely nostalgic for something that I've never been to or experienced, and nor do I want to experience any of the events that people have described in it. There's a lot of animations that help describe what some of the park rides were like. A lot of it is people describing all the issues that they've had with the park, and it balances this effect of being humorous and dramatic that not many movies can pull off. For the most part, I feel like it does a good job. The humor is balanced out with the drama. It does bring forth these issues with how much fun can you have before someone gets hurt, basically. I would recommend it to most people. A movie I would not recommend to many people, though, is Devil All the Time. Oh boy, this movie, another movie in the Robert Pattinson catalogue where it takes a while to get used to his voice.
And I see plenty of white meat and red meat.
I really enjoyed the movie. It's very grimy, very gritty. Antonio Campos goes out of his way to make any scene uncomfortable, and that's something that I kind of do appreciate. It never feels unjustified in what's being shown. It feels so grounded in the shock, in the sense that these are events that did occur in America in, what, the 60s, I think? And it doesn't quite reach the point of something like a Serbian film or a Human Centipede, where it's like, let's just throw things at the wall and just to be as shocking as possible, because these are events that did happen. I would recommend it, but you have to prepare yourself for a slow burn. There are a lot of characters on display here, and it takes a while to see what the point is of throwing so many characters at you at once. Octopus Teacher is a documentary about a guy who befriends an octopus. Pretty good. I liked it for the most part. I think it falls just below great for me, where there's a lot of shots that I really did love in the movie, almost to the effect of a Planet Earth or Blue Planet, but not quite to that extent. However, this movie did show an interesting relationship towards pets and animals that I feel does show a human connection towards the environment that I feel is important for a lot of people. She Dies Tomorrow is a very, very, very low budget, I would say, a horror movie based on its use of existentialism and the fear of death, basically. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if the budget was below $10,000. A lot of the horror elements isn't necessarily in the form of a present being, but more of an omnipresent idea of death, basically. The idea that you know that you're going to die tomorrow, what are you going to do? Personally, I find that to be so fascinating. The biggest downside for this movie, though, I found were some of the performances didn't quite convince me. That being said, I'm keen for anything else Amy Seimetz directs next, because this really was a fun, creative time for me. Emma is a very fun movie that's basically Clueless that I didn't know at first. I'm really glad that Anya Taylor-Joy is making her rounds currently. Like, she's a real up-and-coming star, even though she was not given a good role in New Mutants. I'm so glad that people are starting to notice her and pick up on her abilities. This movie kind of reminded me of a Wes Anderson depiction of a Jane Austen novel, basically. Not to the insane lengths it goes to make everything parallel or to have that quirky dialogue, but it still has that presentation, that very almost photo book presentation that I personally really enjoy. On the Record is a documentary about the sexual abuse allegations in the music industry, specifically with music producer Russell Simmons. It's a very... yeah. This movie's, it's very good, very uncomfortable. There's a lot of, totally under control. It's a documentary about Donald Trump and his his efforts to control the virus because it's totally under control. This is a very frustrating movie, to say the very least. It was released a week after he was infected. This movie is really frustrating and very anger-inducing.
We see in China, panic can be as big of an enemy as virus in these situations, and so there is always that balance.
Mr. Secretary, I don't want to panic over this either. The stock market's crashing. He's outright contradicting everything that you all have just said. Outright contradiction.
I think he's expressing confidence in...
with no medical basis for it. That's what you've just explained to us. Come on.
It really highlights how benevolent people can be during these very unprecedented times. Yeah! The Beastie Boys story was something that I really enjoyed. I was so keen to watch it because of Spike Jonze directing, the director of movies like Her, Adaptation, being John Malkovich. And this one is completely different in terms of what he usually does. It's kind of like a TED Talks with Mike Diamond and Adam Horovitz, just kind of going through the story of the Beastie Boys and how they came to be. I only just listened to the group earlier this year, and Paul's Boutique has quickly become one of my favorite albums of all time. This movie, it was very charming, very fun, very interesting to see how people change with fame, but also how socially relevant the Beastie Boys always have been, especially also given their past, while still being super goofy. It's such a weird dynamic that you can't help but appreciate. It's something that you'd expect from a Christian rap group while still being great somehow.
Humpty Dumpty was a big fat egg.
costume change. Alexander Hamilton is the next one on the list, and I did like the musical. However, I do not believe it translated too well to film. While watching it the whole time, I was thinking, hey, I would love to see this live. The music itself was great. Everyone gave such great performances. The songs were instantly catchy and memorable. But unfortunately, there were heaps of scenes where it felt like we didn't get a clear view of the entire stage or the tone or the atmosphere of the musical. I still did really enjoy it though, and I wouldn't not recommend it to anyone really, so yeah, check it out. Borat's subsequent movie film is genuinely pretty funny. I do like Sacha Baron Cohen's other work that he's done, especially when it comes to his satire. Who is America is great, and I feel like not enough people are talking about it. My favourite movie of his so far would be Bruno, purely from how he tackles homosexuality, especially in the United States, and with Borat's subsequent movie film, he appears to be tackling misogyny. Instead of having the title be his daughter's name, it is just another form of humour to me. Lindsay Ellis has made an excellent video on the topic, and I would highly recommend everyone watch that. And I would recommend people watch Borat as well as Who is America. Mank is a movie by David Fincher. I was really excited to watch this, and though the movie was enjoyable, I would admit I didn't have a strong emotional connection between the characters. However, there was a constant flow of trying to understand this character, the writer of Citizen Kane. I do feel like I'll need to watch it again, but at the moment I still think it's just another great Fincher movie, if it does lag a bit in the middle. Hannah Gadsby's Douglas is really funny. I was a big fan of Hannah Gadsby's earlier work, Nanette. I thought that worked really well as a kind of a TED Talk type of film more than a comedy special, whereas this one, as Hannah puts it, completely removes all of the trauma and goes straight to the comedy. And the humor I thought was really funny, very relevant in a lot of ways. I like movies and humor that lets me reflect on my own personal thoughts and the way that I think and feel and relate to the world, basically, and I feel she did a great job with it. It was really funny, and I would recommend. Another round is a Thomas Vinterberg movie starring Mads Mikkelsen, another collaboration that they've had since the movie The Hunt, which is a fantastic movie. I would recommend that movie to anyone that wants a tense thriller drama. One of the scariest movies I've seen in a long time that's not even a horror movie. With Another Round, Thomas Vinterberg focuses on more of a comedic film, kind of a comedy drama. The whole idea is a bunch of teachers want to test a theory that you reach peak performance when you have a blood alcohol limit of at least 0.05. So having all these teachers trying to make sure that they don't have too much alcohol and trying to come up with excuses to drink alcohol is pretty funny. I do feel like it drags a little towards the end though, the final act. I feel like the final act doesn't quite stick the landing. I still would recommend it to almost everyone. The Charlatan is a World War II biopic. The story follows how this charlatan managed to heal a bunch of people who were very sick. It can be a bit cliche, a bit tropey at points, however I did find myself being constantly engaged. The pacing of the movie was excellent. At points it reminded me of I Am Love and Call Me By Your Name even, surprisingly enough. I could see a lot of people liking the movie, but also, I don't know, keep your conservative father away maybe. Athlete A is one of the most unpleasant movies I've seen this year. The whole time I was watching it, I was just frowning, gritting my teeth. The documentary follows the story of sexual assault against young girls in the USA gymnastics teams, and it's very uncomfortable. Shirley is a great drama horror movie. It kind of reminded me of Mother in a lot of ways by Darren Aronofsky, but without being as supernatural, being much more grounded, much more psychological. The story is about a horror writer finding a house with her husband or her next inspiration. It's very unsettling, like very interesting characters. It's a great study of how people can manipulate each other for their own personal gain just so subtly though. I was kind of blown away. I really want to watch it again. His House is a horror movie on Netflix that you can tell was heavily inspired by Get Out. His House is a story about two immigrants trying to find refuge in Britain. Similar to Get Out, it does deal with a lot of socially relevant issues. There were some scenes that I felt were a little too cheesy, I guess would be the best way to describe it. However, I would not deny that it tackles alienation just so well. The way that simple things like lighting is used gets you inside the head of the characters, makes you feel like you're living this same environment that they are. Boys State was horrifying, not necessarily in an unintentional way, but more so in a holy crap, these are the kids of the next generation way. Boys State is a documentary that follows a bunch of teenage boys who form their own state of government, basically, pitting Republicans and Democrats against each other, forming their own parties, and there are some humorous elements where you have kids saying every day will be Taco Tuesday and whatnot, but seeing how kids use manipulation tactics to persuade their fellow members is scary, because you've seen similar tactics used today with things like memes even. It's interesting to see how kids are politically active, but it's also horrifying seeing these politically active kids talk about things they clearly have no impact on, things like abortion. Crip Camp is a Netflix documentary. It showed how a revolution formed from a group of disabled teenagers and shows how they weren't treated as humans, but also how it led to very simple things that we take for granted today. It's very motivational in a lot of ways. Without giving too much away, there are a lot of scenes that really warmed my heart personally, brought a little tear to my eye, but just because of how beautiful and powerful these emotions were being shared, just from the fact that these people who had different life experiences from us get to experience life as humans. Really beautiful movie. I would recommend to a lot of people. So the next movie is, oh my god, no! Wolfwalkers is one of the most enjoyable movies I've seen this year. It's easily got some of the best animation that I've seen. It's also got some great voice acting. Sound design's impeccable. The only issue that I guess I would say is that it can be a little too childish at points, but there's still a lot of maturity with how these things are being presented. There are a lot of great little subtleties in this movie that makes it stand out among other animated features. The way the movie uses symmetry, or the way it uses lighting, or even how it uses harsh shading, the way certain elements are much more fierce depending on how they affect the environment. I love the class structure in the movie, especially how it is still relevant today. This movie manages to be very tense by using simple framing devices. The movie gets so much better as it progresses. The first time I watched it, I had a few issues, but those were cleared up on rewatch. As the movie progresses, the pacing becomes much tighter, the action becomes much more intense, and by the end, everything just feels so much more liberating. I wish that I could get a Blu-ray of the movie, but at the moment it looks like it's only streaming on Apple TV. But yeah, I cannot recommend the movie enough. It's one of the most fun I've had in a long time, not for any reason in particular. Okay, top 10 best movies of the year. I'm going to try to expand on why these are in my top 10 a little bit more than the other movies, but that being said, everything else I've recommended, I would still highly suggest people check them out whenever they can, support indie filmmakers. At number 10, we have The Sound of Metal. Man, this movie, I love music so much that a movie depicting someone slowly losing their hearing and coming to terms with it, someone who's so emotionally connected to music, losing their hearing, just kind of, struck a chord with me. There's a lot of great sound design, great sound use that I don't want to spoil at all. Like, very creative way of immersing yourself into these characters. It stars Riz Ahmed from the best Spider-Man movie, Venom. And it also stars Birthmark Girl from Ready Player One. Two actors in movies that aren't that great, but show how much they care in a movie like this. There's a lot of time to expand on these characters and making them feel so human, and you can relate so much to their struggle, and love it so much. It's one that I wish I could get on Blu-ray specifically for the sound quality. At number 9, we have The Wolf of Snow Hollow. It's kind of a meta horror comedy thriller about a wolf that's slowly terrorizing and murdering people in a town where the police just do not believe that there's a wolf going around murdering people. It's very funny. Written and directed by Jim Cummings, who also directed Thunder Road, which is one of the best dramedies I've seen in a while. Jim Cummings has a great way of creating characters that are so outlandish but simultaneously so human. In Thunder Road, you have a guy dancing at his mum's funeral, and in this you have someone who's a police officer trying to connect with his daughter. Oh, that is Thunder Road. It's a movie that I don't want to say too much about because I honestly did enjoy it. That being said, I would not go into the movie expecting a monster of the week type movie. It's more of a character dramedy more than it is a horror movie. Yeah, I'd still recommend it if you want a fun time. At number 8, we have The Painter and the Thief, a documentary about an artist whose paintings get stolen and she forms a relationship with the thief. This movie, it's so fascinating seeing how these two parties just connect and form their relationship over time. The movie does a great job of giving you two different perspectives and without telling you what the right way to think about certain things. Is one character justified in doing a certain thing, and is the other character justified in doing something similar? The way information is slowly drip-fed to you is endlessly intriguing. The people themselves are just such fascinating people. The way we're slowly told information about them is just so engaging. At number 7, we have a meme, Pepe the Frog, the Pepe the Frog movie. Feels good, man. This movie is about how Pepe the Frog become indoctrinated by the alt-right. I was not expecting this movie to be as great as it was. It's very well edited, well paced. The trailer makes it look like it's going to be just quirky, random comedy, but the director behind the movie, Arthur Jones, really has an understanding of internet culture and how memes are created, how humor is used. It doesn't come across like, hello fellow kids, at any point in the movie. There are certain elements that I never knew existed behind the meme. There are certain things that are very fascinating, seeing how this one cartoon frog was used to politicize a bunch of extremists. The movie does a great job of giving you a mindset of the 21st century and how technology has affected us in such menial ways. I would recommend the movie to almost anyone, honestly. This is a better cautionary tale on Social Network than The Social Dilemma. At number 6, we have The Climb. This movie is very fascinating. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of shows like BoJack Horseman, just characters that are self-destructive in their own ways. It follows two best friends. How to explain this movie without spoiling it? It follows two best friends and how one's trying to reconnect with one of his old best friends. It's one of the funniest movies I've seen this year. It's one of those movies where the drama is never too sad for the humor, and the humor is never too outlandish for the drama. They blend surprisingly so well together. The movie consists of something like 10 to 15 single take shots. It makes all these characters and their interactions more grounded and makes their little cues just that much more human. It makes their interactions feel like they mean something. Chunky Shrapnel is the music documentary following the band King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. I was thinking about whether or not I should put this on the list, but I've got a few other things on here that I feel like fit as well, so may as well. This movie really makes you feel like you're part of this band that did something like 28 shows in 30 days. By the end of the movie, you feel so exhausted, but simultaneously so exhilarated. You feel like you've just run a marathon. I've almost always been quite a bit of a fan of King Gizzard's music. To prepare for this album, I did listen to their most recent, at that time, the most recent album, Enter the Rat's Nest. Their 70s metal influences just always intrigue me. They always sound so simultaneously nostalgic and fresh, which not a lot of artists can balance. With this movie though, the camera places you in the center of the stage. You never feel like you're part of the audience, you feel like you're a member of the band, which is an experience I haven't quite had with a concert film yet, really. Generally speaking, I really did love this movie. I would recommend it to anyone who's a music fan, and yeah, I would really wish a Blu-ray would come out because, man, those wah-wahs really wad. There are a lot of movies that introduce you to a world that you would never experience, that others experience every day. This year has really shown a lot of women taking hold of directing. That's right, me, a man, I'm a feminist. Let's go, ladies. There is one movie that got to my core more than any other this year, and that was Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. This movie is directed by Eliza Hittman, who's done a few things in the past, but one of the most notable ones were a few episodes in the second season of 13 Reasons Why. And personally, I hate 13 Reasons Why with a passion. However, this movie deals with similar themes and topics in a much more, I guess we could say, realistic and nuanced way that I can't quite explain. There's a lot of really intense close-ups and really grimy environments. The brightest and most ecstatic part of the movie is the opening scene with a stage show. You have the main character singing a song and one of the guys from the audience calls her a slut. And in a bad movie, you'd have either everyone demean him or her, or they try to overreact, whereas in this, everyone just looks uncomfortable and they don't do anything about it, which is much more telling than a show like 13 Reasons Why, where everyone's over-exaggerated and everyone has to overreact to the smallest thing. That's not to say that there aren't things things that go a little too far at points. There's one element that I feel can be a little too on the nose, but that being said, it's very clear what they're trying to go with, and I can see what the point of that scene was, so it's easy for me to forgive. The movie is about a teenage girl in America trying to get an abortion. I clearly will never experience that at all, and I feel like that's why I felt a strong connection with this movie. This is something that I'm always hearing about and I want to know more about, but I will never quite experience either these emotions or these feelings or this guilt. This movie really got into me, it got into my core. It's really interesting because I didn't feel like I understood the character until much further into the movie. The movie doesn't follow a standard story structure. Instead of knowing the character in the first act, you don't really get to know her until much later. The movie does a great job of showing, not telling. It doesn't outright tell you how to feel, it just shows you what these girls are experiencing, and yeah, it's a very hard movie to watch for someone like me, and I feel like these are the type of movies I need to watch. So yeah, I would recommend the movie. That being said, it's not necessarily a fun time. Top 3, here we go. At number 3 we have... Oh no. Not again! Whoa! David Byrne's American Utopia is one of the best concert movies I have ever seen. My friend earlier this year suggested I watch Stop Making Sense, which is a concert doc on the Talking Heads, and I guess I did like the Talking Heads music, but watching that doc really elevated the movie for me. Not just the sound design, the production, the mixing, but seeing David Byrne and the Talking Heads band's charisma on stage just elevated everything for me. And so now, what, 30, 40 years later, we have an older David Byrne, not doing the same things, but still creating such rich, thick tones and creating such engaging songs while maintaining such a strong charisma. This movie really caught me off guard. This has been the most charismatic film Spike Lee has directed since Do the Right Thing, and you can tell he has had such an active role in the directing of this film. There's lots of editing and visual cues that you can tell he specifically decided to place in the movie that elevates the performances above everything else. This movie is just a concert, and I don't want that to dissuade anyone from watching it. If you enjoyed Hamilton, I would highly suggest you check this out, because if anything, this movie made me feel like I was there in the theater watching this show. Like, you felt like you had the same energy that the audience was receiving, basically. I've seen the movie twice now, and I'm so keen to watch it again. It's something just very easy to relax and watch, to relax and study to. There's just lots of time passing by, and I just, yeah, water flowing under us, water flowing over us. There is water underneath the ocean. The blue... My hair is gonna be stuffed up for the rest of this video now. At number 2, we have First and Last Men. This movie is narrated by God, and by God I mean Tilda Swinton. I think I was just watching this movie at the perfect time. I had 2001 A Space Odyssey craving, and this movie was perfect for it. This is the directorial debut by Johan Johannesson, who was famous for being the composer for movies like Arrival, Mother, Mandy, and movies like Prisoners. You can watch this movie blind, and you'd still get the general idea. It's very engaging and very atmospheric while being so minimalist at the same time. I can explain the movie in a few sentences, but because it's only 70 minutes long, it's short and sweet and just long enough for it to leave an impact on you. It kind of feels like Tilda Swinton giving an audiobook about an alien civilization coming to be. Honestly, like, there's not much I can really say about it. It's just endlessly engaging and atmospheric.
The movie is basically like, they were a peaceful kind when they arrived. We don't know much about them. Why are they here? La 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 la.
If you're watching this movie, play it loud. That's all I can recommend, really, because, man, it really did blow me away. Okay, my favorite movie of the year is I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Written and directed by Charlie Kaufman. I just couldn't help myself. To say that I'm a Charlie Kaufman fan is an understatement. He is my favorite screenwriter in Hollywood at the moment. Every single thing that he makes, I am rushing to be the first in line for. Though I am a little biased, I did watch the movie multiple times to see if I still feel this way, and I can firmly say, yeah, everything about this movie I love. Like, regardless of what I think the movie means and what it's about, I cannot deny that I love the performances, I love the cinematography, I love the production design, I love the sound design, I love nearly everything about the movie. There's maybe one thing I dislike that I could be completely wrong about, and that's one character has a little costume design thing that doesn't look real to me, but if anything, this movie is increasingly engaging for me. I love discussing the movie with friends after I've seen it. I love trying to gather a perception on this movie based on other people's experiences. The reason why I love Charlie Kaufman's movies so much is because he's able to create a dream-like atmosphere that not many directors can make. His movies feel like a dream because nothing necessarily makes sense, but you can see the connections between the two dots. So, for example, in this movie, you see picture frames that would have characters that appear and disappear, and in your head, you feel like there is a connection, and it's basically you trying to figure out why is that happening. This movie is really simple. It's just about a relationship that's slowly falling apart. The characters are slowly reaching a point where one character is thinking about ending the relationship. The title works as a double entendre. Is it a tale of suicide, or is it a tale of the end of a relationship? This is one of the most relatable characters I've seen in a Kaufman feature yet, and honestly, I'm keen to see what else he releases in the future. I want to do a video on Charlie Kaufman's movies, and I hope to release it soon. If you've seen any of these movies, if you have any other suggestions, let me know. Like, I want to know if there's anything that I may have missed. I want to keep them to date. I want to check up on things that.
There he goes, rambling again. He's gonna be doing that for quite a while now. Well, that's about all we have for today, folks. Thank you for watching. I'll be constantly updating my letterboxd if you ever wanted to hear my personal opinions, thoughts, or just general trash. Thank you for watching.